Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us for tonight's webinar for adoptive families. My name is Kim King, and hosting our webinar this evening is Libby Deniston. And I just wanted to cover a couple of details for you if you are new to Lifetime. Our website is lifetimeadoption.com, and follow us on Facebook. That's facebook.com/open.adoption. And of course, you can call us at 1-800-923-6784. Of course, tonight's webinar is going to be an interview with an adoptive couple. So if you have questions more so related to your adoption journey, where you are, want to know more about the process, please feel free to call or email us. You can send email questions to adopt@lifetimeadoption.com, or of course, if you're already in the program or already have a coordinator here at Lifetime, call or email your coordinator, and she'll be happy to assist you. And the very first step to getting started with Lifetime, or even just exploring things further, is to fill out our application on our website, which is lifetimeadoption.com/apply. There's also a little form online where you can fill out a request to be emailed some information or to be called, so you're welcome to take that step first if you'd like. Either way, we're happy to have you with us and look forward to helping you take the next steps. And Libby, thank you for setting up our webinar tonight.
Absolutely. One of the reasons that we did coordinate tonight's call was because of a recent update that Jess and Kevin sent to us that included some beautiful photos, but also was a sentiment that they shared in there, which we hear a lot. A lot of adoptive parents, even before they've completed their adoption, often find that just even beginning to think about adoption sparks conversations with people they never imagined, or they just find that the opportunity to talk about adoption or their questions or find out other people's experience, the opportunities just keep coming. And then certainly I know that when families finally do adopt, it seems like they become even more comfortable, and then they just have even more opportunity where they're just telling people what adoption looks like, what it's like for them, how much it's changed compared to maybe their grandparents or their parents or their cousins, or just things that they had heard in the media. And so it really struck me because Kim and I had done a webinar last month, and we had a lot of really great questions about open adoption. And some people were even typing back and forth saying, I really get this. I'm just not sure that we could do open adoption, or, yeah, I know it's available, but I'm not sure I want an open adoption, and things like that. And those kinds of comments always spark us to encourage you to learn more, get more education, get more stories. But then what happened was Jess sent an email to our office just to update us and let us know how she and her family were doing. And she actually said in her email, sometimes when I talk about our adoption story, people say, I don't know if I could ever do an open adoption. And right away, Kim and I mean, it just brought back, it was like the week previous. So we were so excited at the timing of this connection to be able to talk tonight about what open adoption looks like. And every story is so different, but what I love about the fact that they're different is that you will also have your own unique individual story. But if you're sitting here tonight and you have either heard yourself or heard other people say in response to your adoption plans, I don't know if I could ever do open adoption, or maybe you're on the call and you're thinking, I'm all in for open adoption. I still get a little nervous because it's hard to predict what exactly that will look like. It's so great that you're here to hear another story and to see the possibilities and the blessings of how one family has really embraced their daughter's open adoption with birth parents, birth family, and so we get to talk about what that looks like tonight. So with that, Jess and Kevin, I would like to thank you for being here tonight.
Well, thank you for having us. We're really excited to be here and keep the conversation going.
And what I love is also that we get to have both of you on to get the different perspectives too, because I know that sometimes, especially when it comes to understanding or describing or accepting open adoption, that both men and women sometimes are on different pages, or they see it a little differently, or they come to embrace it differently. So it's really good it's valuable for us to have both of you here. So we're glad to have that aspect also. I know that we talked a little bit before the webinar began about where I'd love to start with tonight's call, which is pretty much just a takeoff of what I just shared about your email that you sent in, where you said, you know, I love to tell people about our family story. I mean, we get opportunity after opportunity, and Jess, I know that you've even been consulted by women who are facing unplanned pregnancies, and you get an opportunity to talk about adoption with them too, which is amazing to see how that's being used in your life in so many different ways. But I wonder, did you guys as a family or as a couple ever start out there? Did you ever say to yourself, yeah, I could see open adoption, but I'm not sure how much an open adoption we want, or if that's really for our family? Did you ever have that concern?
We both had a lot of concerns. I'll speak for us both, and then Kevin will chime in here in a sec, I'm sure. But initially, when we started exploring adoption, and even after our first phone call with, it was Jennifer at Lifetime that we spoke to initially, you know, we got off the phone and kind of looked at each other, and the exact quote was, I just don't know if I can do an open adoption. And that's basically where our conversation started. Kevin and I, you can see a picture there of our family. And sorry, Kevin just stepped away because our power went out. He has to go turn on our daughter's noisemaker in her bedroom. But you can see the picture of our family, and that little boy there is my stepson and Kevin's son. And you know, his main concern, and so was mine, was it going to be co-parenting? Is there going to be a competitiveness? Is it going to feel threatening? And so all of those emotions right out of the gate were things that we had to kind of address and see what we were the most comfortable with. And really, we didn't start off comfortable with it, but God really helped us grow in that area through our match and just over the past 2 years.
I could see that too. I know that when we caught up with you, we had talked about a lot of adoptive parents do come to Lifetime with an experience exactly like you were saying with co-parenting, because maybe they do have a blended family, or they themselves, maybe their parents themselves were divorced, and they had 2 separate homes, 2 separate families. And so I could see it being even an added concern or an extra or a unique challenge for blended families or step families to really understand, is open adoption, what does that look like compared to co-parenting? Because right now, you know, we are co-parenting. You're co-parenting with another family for your son. So I could see that, and I'm so glad that you presented that, because I think that sometimes that gets overlooked, but it's easy to see where your experience would actually cause that question to come into play. And which honestly I love hearing too, because it's something that birth mothers ask also. Sometimes they want to be reassured that they're not going to be responsible for a child's, you know, immunization decisions or medical choices or schooling options, things like those. So we always are talking about how open adoption is not co-parenting. So what helped you get through that conversation to deciding, yeah, let's see what open adoption could bring for us? And I'm going to bring up this photo of the then and now that you sent me, because I think this is such a great visual of where you started, family of 3, and now you're family of 4.
Oh man, that is so cute.
For me, you know, I did stress about the whole co-parenting thing, and I thought in my mind initially, well, we've got to set up the boundaries up front. But then after talking to the birth parents, because we were really early on in their pregnancy, and after getting to know them a little bit, I realized that there's really no need to set up some framework at the beginning, because that could be very off-putting. And you don't want to start out a relationship with all of the, like, these are the parameters of our friendship. You don't go into friendships that way. You go into friendships getting to know each other, and really this is no different. I think we had a unique experience with the birth parents to the point where they've actually wanted us to adopt them. But it's
jokingly.
Yeah, jokingly. But it's
yeah.
We've realized that at times there's some boundaries that need to be set, but more times than not, we found that they were the ones that brought up the point saying, we don't want to overstep our bounds, or it's just not been something that we've had to really be proactive about or forceful about. It's just been something that's, oddly enough, worked out very naturally.
Well, and how we worked through that conversation with each other was, in Idaho, where we did our first home study and where we initially signed up with Lifetime, it required a certain amount of hours of adoption education classes, and one of the classes we took was on open adoption, and it kept stressing the importance of being flexible in the relationship, and that, like all relationships, it will ebb and flow. And we had been kind of praying for, we wanted a short match. We didn't want to wait through 7 months of a pregnancy with all these like fears or worries and all those types of things. And we wanted only a probably semi-open adoption. That's kind of where we were when we said, okay, we'll do an open adoption, but we just really probably only want like letters and pictures and a couple of phone calls, but maybe not a lot of face-to-face visits. And those things that we wanted because of our own preconceptions, God just slowly worked on our hearts and kind of tore down some of those walls and stereotypes about what we thought it would be as that relationship built. Because we did have a long match. We had a full 6 months where we ended up, we spoke on the phone or Skype or FaceTime or whatever, probably about 2 times a week for throughout the pregnancy for the 6 months, and we had 2 face-to-face visits during our match, and that's me there with our daughter's birth mom during their second visit out here to see us.
I love that you're talking about this, because we actually had a question that said, so how many times did you communicate with her birth parents? And I think you just answered that, but I also love that both of you touched on a truth that we see at Lifetime, which is for birth mothers and for adoptive parents, it's near impossible to really imagine what kind of open adoption you want until you know more specifically who those people are. And I loved how Kevin spoke to, it really didn't start to play out until we were chosen and in a match with individuals, not just a faceless birth parent. And then you just mentioned it too, how you started out on one side, but then as you got to know her, you realized it was more about them not wanting to overstep bounds, but that you were breaking through different preconceived notions and stereotypes and concerns, because that now you had individuals you were making a relationship with. So I love this photo too. You can barely tell she's even pregnant. So how far along was she at this point when you said you had your second visit together?
That was in January, and our daughter was born in April, so she was pretty far along there. That was, I guess, 6 months, 7 months. Yeah, she's a beautiful girl, and she, what we realized was the concerns and a lot of the fears or worries that we had about this idea, they had a lot of the same, like the other side of the fear or the worry about a relationship, as far as were we who we said we were, and which is actually why they came out to visit us twice. And the first time was before we had even matched. They wanted to see, what did our life kind of match our profile and what kind of people we were. And against a lot of people in our lives' advice, so to speak, they actually stayed in our home one of the times that they came out. And again, that was just us really listening to God and like saying, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this. And so we went from being kind of like, maybe we consider a semi-open adoption to we were all in. It's a relationship, and we were willing to take it where it went.
Well, and you had told me before too, now it's more like they came to visit and they stayed overnight with you, but it wasn't like they stayed for a week, right? Which is unique. I mean, I think you would even acknowledge that that's a very unique aspect. I mean, a lot of people, especially before an adoption happens, because at that point you don't know each other very well, it really has to be an individual decision. But I love that you, like you just said, you came from, I don't know, maybe we'll share photos once in a while too. How about you stay in our home while you're here and make this easy?
Right.
And that's, I mean, for all of you in the audience who are thinking, whoa, now I'm warm enough to open adoption, but I'm not sure I'm going to be cooking breakfast for birth parents, after a few months of knowing them. It's okay. This was, again, you have to hear in their story that this was such a personal choice. I mean, and I would imagine you may have had a different story if this was a different birth mother under different circumstances, or something else was different in it. It was really more how this match felt good moving forward.
Yeah, we just decided we were going to go where the relationship took us, and neither one of us got the, like, let's put up some barriers, and if we were to do it again and it was a different couple, it no doubtedly would be a different relationship, because everyone, our birth mom and her husband, our daughter's birth father, were, they had, their ideas and we had ours, and it's just what happens when we kind of came together, and we just all saw each other as, we were all there for the same reason, which was for Lissy, our daughter.
Well, and one of the things too that I think a lot of people don't think about, and I didn't think about it, I did not think about it initially, but I do now, is that the people who are the birth parents are entrusting the life of their child that they chose not to abort. So already they are wanting this child to live and have a happy life. So to just stand firm and say, I'm not gonna let this birth family ever see their child again is a pretty strong stance to take. And I think, over time, as Lissy gets older and as this new one gets older, there might be some things that come up that, we're not exactly sure how to handle with the new with the birth parents, as they develop, as we develop, as in a relationship. But all of that can be taken care of later. It's not something that and I understand how it feels to be worried about the co-parenting, to be worried about, oh gosh, I don't want them influencing my child or what will soon be my child. But Lissy knows who her parents are. She knows that we are mommy and daddy, and there's no other insecurity or anxiety that goes along with that. We thought there would be, but there just isn't. Yeah, so you can see the birth parents there.
Yeah, that was at the hospital, and they said, do you mind if we get a family picture? And in our mind, of course, we do consider ourselves kind of one big spider webby kind of family.
Yeah, there can never be enough people that love a child. Never.
So we had a question actually, and I have another photo. So if you're online and you can see the photo of their daughter with both birth parents, and I loved also that you pointed out that they are married, and I think that might surprise a lot of people listening, is to think, oh, married parents would choose adoption, and yeah, there's all different reasons, all different backgrounds, all different circumstances that may cause people to consider and choose adoption. And again, I would say those probably fall into the categories of God tore down the walls and stereotypes, and just brought us to a relationship. But we had a great question that said, did they have other children? And I know Lissy's birth mom has a child that they're raising together, right?
That her mom is raising.
Okay,
so,
that's right.
Yes. And that's Aiden there. That's Lissy's half-brother. And then, Nick has some other, he has some children that he doesn't share custody of, that they are with their mom. And so, yes.
And I love this because, again, it's one big family, like you said, and that you do have contact with her biological relatives, I think is beautiful, and it's something that a lot of people don't always imagine. And even when I'm working with birth mothers, for instance, a couple weeks ago I spoke with one woman who said, she started out the conversation saying, I don't think I want an open adoption, but then as I got talking with her, she actually sounded more like, I just really need more time to heal, but in the meantime, I would, if my mom wanted to have contact, or if the baby's father wants to have contact, I'm okay with open adoption in general. It was just more for her preference, knowing her limitations and what she needed, that she was thinking more under the terms of herself. So it's awesome to hear about open adoption these days starting to involve more than just the birth mother as sort of a technical fit-in-a-box open adoption. And so what is it like, because these photos now, Lissy is over 2 years old, so these were a couple of years ago. What is the relationship like now? And I'm going to bring up another little newborn picture of Lissy here.
Well, I wanted to kind of I wanted to talk about this a little bit, is that people often have a preconceived idea of how the relationship's going to be, or how involved the birth parents are going to be, but you have to understand, just because it's a child doesn't necessarily mean that people don't get on with their lives. And our contact with them over the last couple of years has kind of waxed and waned, and we have a unique relationship with them that if they are kind of needing to discuss a decision that they're wanting to make, or have just some general life questions, that we're the ones they call. They don't talk to their family. They don't really talk to their other friends. They call us. But a lot of times it's not so that they can keep in contact with Lissy or whatever. It's just the relationship we've built. And oftentimes, I can imagine that this is true with pretty much anybody, but it's certainly true with us and them, is that they've gone on with their lives, and so they get caught up in the busyness of it and whatever, and so the communication kind of gets longer and longer in between.
And, in addition to what Kevin just shared, is that, one of the things that we were asked before we were matched, just in one of our conversations while we were getting to know each other and see if we, if this was a lifelong relationship we wanted with each other, was, would it be okay if my parents at some point in the future wanted to see the baby? How would you feel about that? And our answer was, there's no such thing as too much love, so of course. And since Lissy's birth, her birth father's parents send Christmas cards and presents for not just Lissy, but also for Kanan, and Easter presents and birthday stuff. And then on the maternal side, on Facebook, we're connected with Lissy's maternal grandmother and great-grandmother, And so, not a lot of contact, but they see photos, or sometimes they'll comment, or they contacted us recently because they were coming to vacation here. They had a timeshare, and they said, I'm kind of uncomfortable asking. I don't want to step on any toes, but would you be interested in getting together? And so we said yes, of course. So we had a little play date, and it was Lissy's biological aunt, her, her maternal grandparents, and
you sent me this. Is this the photo here, Jess? From that visit? Let's see here. It's popping up, I think.
Yeah. Yep. So that's Lissy and Kanan with Aiden, her half-brother, and then her aunt is there too. And then there were, some other family members were there. And it was just a fun play date. And none of us knew how it was going to go. We didn't have a script or anything. But Aiden, who is 5, called Lissy his baby sister and Kanan his big brother. And I mean, we're not big into like correcting labels or keeping people politically correct or anything. And we're like, yep, that sounds about right. I mean, to a 5-year-old, we're all family. That's kind of the order of things. And it was really sweet. So it's as much as we, everyone says like, oh, I mean, that must be so great for Lissy, but it's great for us too, because we were able to see pictures of Lissy's birth mom at the same age as Lissy, and hear stories about how both of them have gotten a hold of a stick of butter and eaten them, like just some of those little quirky stories we get to share, and they get to share in our joy, and we get to share in theirs, and they feel real.
Will you share the story that you told me? Because here are 2 different photos. Now, the bottom one is Lissy and her biological half-brother, and then at the top is Lissy's birth mother, and then Lissy at the same 10-month mark. But you said, was it recently that you were looking at photos and Lissy saw a photo of her birth mother and said, oh, she looks like me? Would you talk about what that meant for you to be able to have just even those photos as part of Lissy's story?
Yeah, it was actually during the visit when when they all came out to Vegas, and she calls her Mimi Kathy, I think, because what do your other grandkids call you? That's what, fine, we're great. So she had she brought out a bunch of pictures just kind of to share with us, and Lissy was looking, and she pulled one up and she said, look, Mommy, it's me. And I started crying, a happy cry, because I know that none of us really do it intentionally, but we look for a likeness. Where do I get those eyes, or how come my with the dimples or whatever. And so for her to see that, it was just, I don't think I'll ever forget that moment, and I'm so thankful that Kathy brought those photos to share, not just with me, but with Lissy, and that we could do the same. We brought some pictures, and that's how we found out that both Kirsten and Lissy had gotten a hold of the stick of butter and just chowed down on it. Apparently there's just a craving there for that. So
that is funny. But I mean, all the way to just the benefit of having, most people will talk about, oh, it's such a benefit to have medical history, just a little bit of family medical history, or even the prenatal records, certainly the birth records, compared to the old days of closed adoption when you just had nothing. But then all the way to these little details that are meaningful, and maybe they're not totally necessary, but they matter. And for her only being 2 years old to just see that already. We had a great question. Now, you talked about what she calls, you said Mimi Kathy, so that's birth grandma. But how is Lissy coming to know her birth parents? Does she have special names for them?
No, she just calls them by their name. You know, that was something we talked a lot about during the pregnancy, which was, you know, all kinds of things. We asked, is there something specific you would like to be called? And they said, no, you know, we'll just let it kind of evolve naturally, which is, we have found to be the best way, just like any relationship, just let it turn into what it's going to turn into. And even as, you know, as Lissy's gotten older and some time has passed, we've asked him again, you know, would you like her to call you something else? And for now, they just want, you know, it's just their names, but I'm sure because Lucy has got this real fierce little personality that she will probably have a very special name for them that she'll come up with on her own, most likely, and you know, they're okay with that. She knows that she grew in Kirsten's tummy, and that's kind of about it. I mean, she's two, but yeah. But yeah, so right now she does send them little videos. Like she'll say, "Can I send Nick a video?" And so we'll take a little video of her and just text it over or email it, and you know, sometimes we hear back and sometimes we don't, but if she wants to, we do it.
I love all these photos too, and we're kind of hopping around just mostly to kind of match the tone of what we're talking about too. It's not really in sequence, so if you're looking at this and you're a sequential person, don't be confused. But I love all these photos because also what continues to stand out for me, and I think this is so true for probably every adoption story that I've seen come together at Lifetime, is just I can't imagine Lissy in a different family. It really seems like you are the best parents to not only bring out her personality, but also help her to hone it and really be the best fit. I mean, do you think that her birth family recognizes that in you as parents? Do you ever get that kind of feedback from them, like what an awesome job you're doing with her or how grateful they are? Because I know that some birth parents do express that, even if they can't find the words, that they feel so grateful for how well their child's doing in your lives.
You know, well, we have two things along those lines, and the first is that not too long ago, I had a friend contact me because she was pregnant and she wasn't in a place where she wanted to parent or felt like she could parent, and so she wanted to talk to me a little bit about adoption. And you know, I helped her as much as I could, but I said, do you mind if I contact our birth parents and see, you know, maybe connect you two or whatever? And so she said yes, and so I called Kirsten and I asked her, I said, please, you know, be honest, and if you don't want to answer something, don't, but, you know, we have a pretty honest and open relationship. So I asked him, you know, what are some things she should think about as far as adoption, and what questions should she ask, and is there anything you would have done differently or wish you had known about us before you placed the baby? And it's kind of uncomfortable initially to ask those questions, but really it was really validating and humbling to hear how happy they were that, you know, Lissy was our daughter, and that they really felt like they wouldn't have done anything different because we were exactly not just what Lissy needed, but what they needed also. And so that was the first time, well, one of the first times that we got some real validating feedback. And the second time, Kevin said he wanted to share the second time, which was also very validating.
Well, just they must think we're the best thing since sliced bread, because now they've asked us to be the adoptive parents of their next child because they're pregnant again. And I hadn't thought much about that, but I've come to know now that that's like one of the rarest things ever. We had thought that, you know, if they got pregnant again, they might be in a place where they would want to raise the child themselves, but they're not. And so their first call and first thought was of us, because they just love how we are with Lissy. They love how we are with them and their families. And, you know, there's some turmoil in their family, with different mothers and all that kind of thing. But we don't play into that because it's none of our business, and they respect that we are staying true to our word, that is to share a picture, share a visit or whatever with all of the extended family, because that's what we said we do, and we're doing it. And so even though they may have some issues with their folks, they respect the fact that we're holding up our end of the bargain, and that's what's made them come back to us again to adopt another child from them.
You're so right, and I think a lot of families, I don't think they would intentionally overlook it because they'd just be so busy trying to get ready for the next baby, but also excited, like, wow, we never thought we'd have the opportunity to adopt an actual biological sibling, let alone some families don't ever know if they're going to have an opportunity to adopt again. And so the fact that you're getting that, but that you could actually slow down in this time and think, wow, the ultimate confidence and compliment to us is that they're trusting us to do this again, that they want to, they came to us first, which right there, we don't talk about this a lot, but there are some women who do find themselves pregnant again, sometimes couples, sometimes single women, and they're still not ready to bring that child home. And there have been times when we get calls from women who say, you know, I would love for, you know, my daughter's adoptive parents to adopt this baby too, but I can't reach them. They dropped contact with me. And I always wonder what those parents might have thought if they'd realized that even though the open adoption didn't continue the way maybe she had expected or hoped, that she still actually trusted and valued what they were giving to her other child, and that she wanted to do that again. But the fact that you've kept this relationship open, and you are, I mean, you said earlier, but I mean, I would say the word mentor is kind of a stale word under these circumstances, but truly they come to you. And I think you guys are an excellent example of what we see as a truth, which is sometimes adoptive parents are modeling behaviors and stability for birth parents in a way that they may not be able to see in their immediate family. And that's for all different reasons. It's not a judgmental statement at all. It's just more, everyone comes from different backgrounds, and the fact that you guys actually value that, to me, I hope that everyone listening in the audience could be inspired to grow that kind of heart for their child's birth family, because it's really not about, well, they shouldn't live like that, or should this or shouldn't they. It's more, that's the reality of their life, and they're doing the best they can, but they also trust us, not only with your daughter, but just to talk with you about the things going on in their lives. That you continue to be there for them relationally is just beautiful. And I wanted to, because you guys do have a son, and so I know for a lot of people in the audience, and we had one or two questions come up, but I'm going to kind of paraphrase. Since you already had a child who was not essentially adopted, I mean, I know that it's a blended family situation, but he knows his parents as mom and dad, the parents who gave birth to him. What is open adoption like for your son now a couple of years in even, and to have all of Lissy's birth family kind of in the mix now too? Do you think he gets it, or do you think he just rolls with the flow? What is that like? Because there's a lot of parents that would have a concern just based on, could my other child understand it, and would it be okay for them?
Well, I don't, for Kanan, he's 6 years older now than Lissy is. And so, he understands it to a degree. We answer questions as they come up, but honestly, it's not that big of a deal. He sees her as his little sister, and whatever happened, or whoever is called whatever, he doesn't really care that much. He loves his sister. He is fiercely protective of her, and he loves that he has a sister. He doesn't really care where it came from, and he doesn't really. He's whenever he's with us or whatever, he talks, and we're on a Skype with the birth parents. He'll get on and say hi, but it's not as big of a deal as we wondered it would be. Now that could change over the years as he gets more mature and starts understanding things. But it's not the big deal I thought it might be. It's and I'm sure every child is different, but it's not as big. It's just not that big of a deal.
Well, and that was another thing. Earlier I spoke to. I had this list of ways that I wanted God to answer our prayers. I not only did I have the prayer requests, but I thought I had figured out the answers, which was short match, semi-open, and we really wanted Kanan to be 3 when his sister or brother was born. But I think the age difference worked kind of in our favor in that regard, in that he was a little bit older, so we could explain it to him a little differently. But even one of the things we always say is, like, if we're okay, then they're okay. And because we've never made it this big, huge deal, or we've always just handled it lovingly and answered their questions, but it wasn't like, sit down, we need to talk about who we're going to go see and what their roles are. I mean, that's just not how we are. And because we've always just handled it like we would any other family, he's just embraced it as the more the merrier, more people to love me and more people for me to love. And I think he understands it, especially now as he gets older and he, with the new baby coming, he gets to see it kind of from the very, very beginning, which is pretty exciting, and he can put those pieces together. But it's been very smooth. I mean, we expected turmoil, and like when he would go back to his mom's house, we thought, he might be jealous that she was with us all the time and he wasn't. But God has really just protected our family and helped hearts just grow. I mean, it's been really sweet to see how that relationship's developed too. Go ahead.
I love that you spoke to that, because I do think sometimes it's a valid concern, but what we usually see is that children are so much easier going about these things that it's really the adults that tend to overthink it.
Right.
And then add stress to the mix. And if any of you in the audience are overthinkers, you probably are nodding your head and admitting it's true. But I love that, because even if you have adopted before and now you're adopting again, no 2 adoptions are the same. And with them even adopting a child again from the same birth parents, that child's going to have a completely unique personality. And so the way he or she handles their adoption story could be completely different than Lissy, and then we'll have to roll with that flow too. And so, I mean, I love that just when you look at families in general. Anybody who has siblings or even multiple cousins would probably agree that it's just amazing how different you can be within one family, but that you don't have to make a huge deal out of it. And so I'm so glad you spoke to that. Kevin, I'm curious for you, do you think that there's anything that's more unique to the adoptive dads as far as maybe a concern or an experience, maybe something that would speak to the men in the audience who are still on the fence or who are just wondering how to make the most of this experience? Because sometimes it's very heavily weighted on the women involved.
I'm not really sure how to answer that. I was probably the one initially who was the most hesitant about adoption, period. And then when we started talking about adoption, I was probably still the most concerned. I am very protective of my wife, of our son, and so I didn't really know, what to expect. But it's like I was saying earlier, you just kind of have to step back and just take it as it comes, and know that, these people are not going to be in your life every day. They're not going to be hovering over you, judging you on how you love or discipline or whatever this child. It just doesn't work like that. And for a man, I don't think that most men get as excited about the prospect of a baby as women do. It's just not, we're just not wired the same. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question, but it's just, I'm more pragmatic about the whole thing. And now that she's here, of course, it's the greatest thing in the world. But I don't know if I'm answering your question.
No, I think you are. I would say we're getting people that are sort of digitally nodding in agreement, because I think that's so true that if you're a wife in the audience, perhaps maybe what you could hear from this is that it's okay if your husband isn't having these mushy, deep conversations with you about what it'll be like, because if you were pregnant, it'd probably be the same way. You know, a baby is more a reality just usually in most families once the baby's here, not so much as it's coming, but especially with adoption, it's very common for one spouse or the other to be a little bit ahead, and then the other one catches up, and then they get on the same page and they move forward. So I love that you spoke from your experience about that, because I think that was very helpful. We just had someone said, my husband is exactly the same way, and it helps to balance my emotional stuff.
And even with this second adoption that's coming up, and we know how great the first one was, we still have the exact same, I mean, kind of argument last night even. Because, you know, you want someone to just be like, woohoo, we're so excited. And he's like, well, you know, more
diapers, more formula, more up all night. You know, I'm thinking about the pragmatic side of things. I'm not thinking about, you know, all the joy and fun and memories and all that at this point. I'm just wired that way, you know, and so it's not that I don't want to do it. It's just that I'm just not at the giddy phase. I'm just not, you know, and that's okay, I think.
Yeah.
So. Right. And we had another adopted mom that chimed in and said that's me. Sometimes I worry because my husband doesn't seem as excited as I am. And I would say, I mean, certainly conversations and honesty are necessary. But what I love hearing in Kevin's testimony is just because I wasn't a certain type of excited or displaying it in a certain way didn't mean I was hesitant or not on board.
Right.
I don't think you would have been the type of husband to just let your family go down this path if you were just going to stop it all along.
Right, and yeah, and that was never my intent. I just, you know, I as the head of the household, you know, and not that I'm like this dogmatic man, you know, it's just that a lot of the responsibility I feel, you know, and a lot of my non-giddiness, I guess, comes from, okay, well, I've got to think about more life insurance, and I've got to think about, you know, pay for all these things, and you know, it's just the mechanics of it that I get caught up in, and I think a lot of men do. You know, it's not all the cooing and everything of a new baby that we really even think about at this point.
Right. Well, and most men, I would say most men in circumstances that your family's in, where you're able to make decisions about your future, you plan ahead for things. Certainly, probably even finding out you're adding a third child to your family, there was probably this aspect as the husband provider that you're thinking, oh my gosh, a third child, you know, now I have to work harder, do this more. I mean, just your natural personality and instinct to be there for your family as much as possible in every way possible is going to cause a different reaction compared to maybe there are husbands out there who are the more emotional leader in the home, and the wife is the one that's practical and saying, let's just do these steps, and I told you I'm on board, let's go. You know, so it's just really about knowing each other, communicating with each other, and you know, taking steps, but you know your spouse best. So nobody can say, oh, he just means this or that. You have to trust what your spouse is saying, but also not read too much into it, because I hear so often, and we had a few comments here, I mean, mostly what we see are spouses that balance each other through the adoption process, that, and probably that would be mirrored throughout your whole parenting experience and your marriage and just how you handle life in general. So let's see here. We had a couple other questions, but I think we kind of covered some of them. I love seeing these comments come in. We had one question that said, I think you kind of touched on this, but more so wondering, so why did her parents choose adoption? I think I would like to add more to that. Why did they ever tell you what stood out about you and why they chose you specifically as Lissy's parents?
I think, sometimes what they said was we didn't know exactly what it was, but something in your profile connected with them. And one of them, I'll tell you, is that we fostered pit bulls, and somebody had suggested, I think my mom probably suggested to take the pictures out because that might be scaring away birth parents or something. And I was like, well, I mean, it's who we are. And so they were in a costume, and there was no teeth. It was just like a cute little picture. But when they saw that, they saw people that kind of didn't necessarily believe stereotypes. And to them, it was important that the people that they were going to have this relationship with, hopefully for life, be open-minded. And so just some of the pictures had us, got us talking. And once we, met and started talking, and they realized we're just people, and we accepted them for where they were at today, and we encouraged them to where they wanted to go, and even helped them write down some little goals. We really kind of took on a big brother and sister sort of role. And I think for them, that was, they needed someone willing to be in the relationship, and not just here's a few pictures and a couple letters a couple times a year, but to really kind of be their friends. And we initially were a little intimidated by all the contact, but really at this point, there are times where, they obviously have their own life that they live, and so sometimes when we reach out to them and they don't, connect back, we realize that, that's what relationships are. But I think that was important to them, the acceptance.
Well, and it's a weird definition that they've given us, or a weird worldview. They're not completely void of a spiritual belief, but they both have felt in their lives that there has been a dogmatic intrusion in their lives, and they didn't like that. But they liked the fact that we were a Christian family. We didn't hide that from them at all. But they also liked the fact that we weren't trying to convert them, or to be too dogmatic in the way that we looked at our beliefs and our spirituality. And I think that for me, I looked at it as, well, this is an opportunity to maybe plant a seed, because, Christ didn't break people into believing or getting their life on the straight and narrow. He met them where they were and just tried to guide them through example, or, well, through love. And that's what we've tried to do with them. But we don't know if they're ever going to turn their lives around and be real strong Christians. We don't know. But that's not for us to judge. That's not for us to accuse them of anything. It's just for us to love them. And if we can love them and love Lissy, and maybe we planted the seed, and maybe somebody else will cultivate that someday. But that's the part that we play, and that's good enough.
I think that I love that you both share those two different aspects of that. One is the obvious, which comes out in your profile, and the other is something that uncovers more naturally and progressively, especially as the relationship goes. And you're right, Kevin. I mean, who knows, 10 years from now, 10 months from now, 10 days from now, who knows, that they may just know you're a safe place even to ask questions when it comes to their salvation or what you believe or where your joy comes from. That's a secondary opportunity that you're seizing, and I think that's beautiful the way you phrased it, because I just spoke with an adoptive family this week, and they shared with me how their daughter's birth mother had chosen them because they did have a strong faith. And so, you know, if you're a family of faith, don't be afraid to put it out there, but also remember that a lot of these women are coming from different backgrounds, different experiences, and certainly when they're facing a pregnancy that may be unplanned, or even if they're in a steady relationship with that baby's father, it's not the right time. Maybe their circumstances are not going to improve such that they can bring that baby home. You never know where they're coming from, and so sometimes these women and these birth parents come from a place of just even the fear of being judged, and most of them have already experienced feeling judged by some person in their life, either over the pregnancy or other aspects of their choices, their life, wherever they've come from. So you have to also remember, like you just said, that it's also about us just loving on them and in a healthy way, and being available and just seeing what can come of that. And that's what I loved about bringing you guys on tonight, was because there are so many possibilities with open adoption that it doesn't all have to go one way. It doesn't have to fit into the circle box or the square box, you know, that it's really personal, because all of you involved are different than everyone involved in a different adoption story. So there's no way to mirror and mimic them, that you're really making it something that works uniquely for your family. And I love this photo, this selfie of the four of you, because to me this is the energy of your family, is just we gel well together, we roll with our life. And one of you pointed out earlier, I think it's worth it. One of the main concerns that we hear when people talk about open adoption and their hesitancy is that they don't want it to be on the forefront of their mind every single day, you know, that we were completed through adoption. And it's not to say that that means someone's not proud of it, but I love that you actually said, you know, the day-to-day, we're just mom and dad with 2 kids and figuring out the schedules and who's eating what when, and are we wearing clean clothes, and what time is bedtime, and everything like that. So just because you have an open adoption doesn't mean that every day is this constant reminder of how you're made up. You are just a family, and you have more people to love your child because you have this bigger extended family through these birth relatives of your child. So I love that you guys spoke a lot to that. You know, as we wrap up, I mean, the audience, we've had some great questions and comments, but they seem a little enthralled. They're kind of quiet tonight. Kim, I know that you've been typing with people in the background. Do you have any questions you want to add before we wrap up tonight?
No, I just want to, I mean, I know that when we were doing our little prep time, we were all expecting Kevin to be a man of few words, but, you know, Kevin, the Lord, I think, really spoke through you tonight, and I really appreciate the things that you said. And Jess, too, you know, just that open heart you have, rolling with the flow of life, and that these birth parents came into your life. It's part of what God has for you. And I love the comments that you mentioned about just relinquishing that control, even in your prayer life. You know, that you trust that what the Lord has for you is better than anything we could ever imagine for ourselves. So I appreciate you both for the things you've shared, and you've answered all my questions.
Well, just one other thing I wanted to comment on.
Yeah.
There's very few, if any, days that go by that I think, oh gosh, Lissy didn't come out of Jess's tummy. I just don't think about it. You know, she's our daughter. That's it.
Well, and, you know, like you said, relinquishing control, you know, this is very personal maybe to me and my relationship with the Lord, but one day, you know, the day that we, you know, we just put a bunch of money out or something, and I said, all right, God, I guess I'm just going to have to trust them that they're not going to change their minds. I mean, we were still kind of in this, like, maybe fearful place. And just loud and clear, I heard this loving, soft voice say to me, you're going to have to trust them. He's like, they're trusting you with a human life. And I really think about that. We've been entrusted with this awesome responsibility. And, you know, without a birth mom, I wouldn't be a mom today. And so, you know, I don't think about it every second of the day, but I sure am thankful that I've been entrusted and that I'm going to be entrusted again. And so, yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up, Jess, because I do remember when we spoke last week, I had made notes that you had that that clarity, that God wink come in when you had paid the attorney fees, right? And so you were thinking, okay, this is the ultimate. We're taking a chance on this and moving forward with this match. And I would say most adoptive parents get a little bit nervous at that point because they're thinking she could still change her mind. So this feels like a huge risk to me, and that you found the peace in realizing that she's taking a risk with you guys too, and that there's trust being built on both sides. I love that you brought that up.
Yeah.
And I would say you having that sort of perspective probably is just what has unfolded everything that is today, and that's going to keep going in the future. I mean, trust in any relationship doesn't just stop when you shake hands and have that moment of, yeah, I trust you. It builds and it ebbs and it flows, and I love that earlier you even spoke about, you know, sometimes we're in touch, sometimes we're not in touch, and that's just like any relative or loved one or friend. I mean, really, our coworkers are probably the only people we talk to on a daily basis, and depending on what type of work you do, that may not even be true. And so it's so important not to judge the open adoption based on something that happens, you know, necessarily in the beginning or right away after the adoption takes place, or even a year from the birth. That it's something that's going to evolve over time into its own thing. So is there anything that either of you want to add here before we close out tonight?
You know, no, I would just really want to encourage people to, you know, just to be flexible and to be yourself. I mean, really, be yourself, because ideally it would be a lifelong relationship, and you don't want to go into it with false pretenses or trying to be someone you think that they want you to be, because you're your best when you're yourself, and that's what's going to build a long, true, healthy relationship, is just that being authentic, and they'll appreciate it and love you for it, and it's not scary. It's a real blessing, as much as it's a blessing, you know, to Lissy, like I said, you know, we feel very loved too, and it's really added to our lives having this kind of extended network of people that look like our daughter.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here tonight, and just pouring out and sharing your candid comments. We really appreciate it, and I really think that you hit home with a lot of people's thoughts and questions, even if maybe they didn't know how to put them into words, because the comments we're getting here is, yes, goosebumps, or what a great family. They sound so wonderful and inspiring. So thank you for being here tonight and helping the people who are just hoping to adopt, or maybe even just researching adoption. It's really been a blessing to hear this, but also for those of you listening who maybe you have just now begun a match in your adoption, or you have already adopted and you're moving through the time when that relationship continues. I hope that you can be inspired and helped through stories like Jess and Kevin's tonight, because you're creating your own unique story and timeline and relationship too. So thank you all for joining us tonight, and if you have any questions or feedback from tonight's webinar, we'd love to hear from you. You can always email me at libby@lifetimeadoption.com, or you can call us if you have questions and you don't have a coordinator. Reach out to us, 1-800-923-6784. And there's lots of information at lifetimeadoption.com. And if you're working with us at Lifetime already, make sure you keep in touch with your coordinator and let her know how she can help or questions you have. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jess and Kevin, for your time tonight. And we will meet with all of you again very soon.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Night.